Welcome to 28storms.com. This is your tropical weather update for Sunday, October 2nd. Ophelia is still a 100 mile per hour Category 2 hurricane. However, it is beginning to significantly weaken over cooler waters and more hostile mid to upper air wind conditions. All that being said, though, we still have tropical storm watches in effect for the extreme southeast portion of Newfoundland, and very strong tropical storm force winds should begin to move into the area overnight into tomorrow morning. The overall structure of the hurricane is beginning to decline, but as mentioned in the 5 p.m. Hurricane Center discussion, the latest microwave satellite pass does indicate that Ophelia has a closed eye, and that is the main reason why they have held the current intensity to 100 miles per hour. The well-defined eye that was visible on the visible satellite imagery yesterday afternoon has since deteriorated, but if you go ahead and look at the latest enhanced infrared, we still see significant convection wrapping around that overall center. But you can see the mid to upper level trough on the latest water vapor beginning to make its way eastward out of the mid-Atlantic and New England states. And in addition, if we go ahead and look at the sea surface temperatures overlaid on here, it is moving into an area with much cooler water temperatures, so this should weaken below Category 1 hurricane intensity as it begins to move into Newfoundland. Elsewhere, we are still dealing with Tropical Storm Philippe. However, Philippe is no threat to land, and it will more than likely recurve well to the east of Bermuda as it begins to interact with the same trough that will soon be steering Ophelia into Canada. The latest basin-wide satellite view also shows Tropical Storm Philippe swirling about in the central Atlantic. We can see that it is still encountering quite a lot of northwest wind shear, and that is the main reason why the surface circulation is partially exposed. The rest of the Gulf, Caribbean, and deep tropical Atlantic are fairly quiet this afternoon. We do have some convection located to the south of a mid to upper level trough over the western Caribbean. However, upper level conditions are forecast to remain unfavorable for at least the next few days. If we go ahead and look at the water vapor, you can still make out some pretty strong westerly winds aloft streaming out of Central America, and that is the reason why we're not expecting anything in the Atlantic Basin, at least over the next 3 to 5 days. The medium range could be a little bit different. Stay tuned as we will soon go over some of the model guidance. Also, the models are trying to develop more activity to the south of Mexico in the eastern Pacific, but the latest visible image shows that the tropics are quiet for now. Before looking ahead with the latest model data, I would first like to show the latest surface plot for the southern Gulf of Mexico, southwest Atlantic, and western Caribbean. And right off the bat, we do see a stalled out frontal boundary, and usually this is the time of the year that you will look for stalled boundaries in the southeast Gulf or northwest Caribbean, as those can often be the staging point for gradual tropical development. Now, starting off with the 12Z run of the ECMWF forecast, and this is looking at the 850 millibar vorticity parameter, we can still make out that stalled frontal boundary over the southeast Gulf and extending into Florida and the southwestern Atlantic. And we really don't expect much in the way of any development over the first 5 days, but it becomes a little bit interesting here by day 6. We see a vorticity max trying to develop just to the south of Sarasota, Florida. By day 7, we actually have an organizing area of low pressure here, and we've been talking about this for the last 2 or 3 days. As long as we have a very strong surface high over much of the eastern United States, this will often translate to more lifting to the south here over the western Caribbean. And to top things off, we have the stalled frontal boundary that could possibly be in play here in the extended range. Now, as we go beyond day 7, this really gets very tricky to forecast, but all the way through day 10, the model is advertising a large area of low pressure over much of the eastern Gulf of Mexico and into the state of Florida. This very well could be subtropical in nature, but nonetheless the potential for development is there. It should also be noted that the European is showing a very active monsoon trough to the south of Mexico, and I would not at all be surprised if we get at least one landfall threat here within the next 10-day period. Switching over to the 12Z run of the Canadian CMC model, it is also advertising a very active eastern Pacific to the south of Mexico, but also notice here by day 6 we see increasing low-level vorticity surrounding western Cuba just to the west of Key West, Florida, so this is really in similar agreement with the European model at least through day 6. Now, unfortunately, the 12Z run of the CMC is only available online through the first 6 days, but if we go ahead and switch over to the 0Z run that was posted overnight, that is available through day 10, and this was the 7-day forecast. And if we advance this into day 8 and day 9, much like the European, it's developing a 1000 millibar surface low near Miami, Florida, and by day 10 it's actually deepening this low as it begins to head north up the Florida Peninsula. Furthermore, much like the CMC and ECMWF, the GFS is keeping much of the eastern Pacific quite active. Now, it's somewhat uncertain as to which actual low will begin to break off from the monsoon low and actually begin to develop into a tropical cyclone, but I would say that the odds of an actual storm developing over there is probably above 70%. And through the next 7 days, the GFS is not developing any storms in the Atlantic Basin, but nonetheless, we are still noting the higher vorticity that is beginning to be picked up by the model here over the southeast Gulf, southwest Atlantic, and even to some extent into the western Caribbean. And finally, the most recent forecasts for the Madden-Julian oscillation are continuing to take the MJO into phase 8 as we go into the medium and extended range, and as stated in the prior video, as the MJO begins to work its way into phases 8 and 1, that is usually when we do see a slight uptick in tropical activity in the Atlantic Basin, and especially the Gulf and Western Caribbean. So interest in Newfoundland should be preparing for tropical storm force conditions overnight into the morning hours, and after that we should have a couple days of no activity here across the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific, or at least no activity in terms of a storm threatening land. However, that is quite possibly going to change as we go into the next 3 to 8 days, both in the Eastern Pacific and possibly closer to home here on the Atlantic side, and I'm talking more so the Northwest Caribbean and the Southeast Gulf of Mexico. So please stay tuned to 28storms.com. We will have more updates throughout the upcoming work week.